Hey folks, Jason here with another quick music theory tip. This one is in response to a request from several people who have reached out asking me to do a video on tritone subs or tritone substitutions. For those folks who play jazz, you may have heard this phrase, go ahead and just play the tritone sub of that chord. So in this video, I'm going to break down what a tritone sub is, why it works on a fundamental level, and then an application in the B section of rhythm changes. So let's dive right into it. So first off, we're going to start with a chord. Let's start with something like a D7 chord, right? Now to find the tritone sub, it's actually quite simple. If you're familiar with the interval of a tritone, which is essentially 1, 2, 3 whole steps, also called a diminished fifth or augmented fourth, you take the root of whatever chord you're on. So if we're on a D7, the root is D, and we just go up or down 3 whole steps. So A flat is 3 whole steps away, and then we do an A flat 7. So we'd say the tritone sub of this D7 chord I'm playing is A flat 7. Now, why does that work? The key is not in the root of the chord. The key is actually in the 3rd and 7th of the chord, right? And this is why I'm omitting the 5th. There's a lot of other reasons which I'll get to in future videos, but for right now I'm omitting the 5th because our focus is on the 3rd and 7th of the chord, which are called guide tones. The reason they're called guide tones is because they essentially provide a guide to the sonority or color or character of the chord, right? There's all kinds of chords that are D chords that I could play. I could play, a D minor 7, D major 7 sharp 5, D7 sus. These are all D chords, but they all have a very different quality to them, right? So it's not really the root that defines the quality or character of the chord, it's the other notes. And for major 7 chords, minor 7 chords, and the dominant 7 chord that we see so often in jazz, blues, and a lot of other styles, it's the 3rd and 7th. So for the D7, our 3rd of F sharp and our 7th of C are the guide tones. Now you'll notice that the tritone sub of D7 is A flat 7. Notice how the 3rd and 7th of the A flat 7 are identical to the 3rd and 7th of the D7. Or rather, I should say the 3rd and 7th of the A flat 7 are identical to the 7 and 3. We've just flipped them, but they're really the same notes. So if I were to play just these 2 notes without the root, it could imply a D7, or it could imply an A flat 7. Right? Either chord is acceptable. Now, there's a lot more applications, a lot more things we can dive into, but I'm just going to show you one very specific application, which is rhythm changes. There's another video I do where I talk about whole tone scales over a falling fifth cycle. I put that in the description box below. But for this video, we're going to focus on tritone subs as they apply. So the 4 chords that you'll most commonly see for the B section of a rhythm changes in B flat, which is a key it's commonly played in, are 2 measures of D7, 2 measures of G7, 2 measures of C7, 2 measures of F7. And now, so I'm using this falling fifth pattern, D, G, C, F, right? And what I can do basically is I can do a tritone sub of every single one of these chords to create a chromatic movement. So the tritone sub of D7, we already know from earlier in this video, is A flat 7. The tritone sub of G7 is D flat 7. The tritone sub of C7 is G flat 7. And the tritone sub of F7 is B7. Now, for each of these tritone subs I've played, you'll notice that the guide tones are the same. I already did it for D7, but let's do it for the others. For G7, the 3rd and 7th, or guide tones, are B and F, which are also the guide tones for D flat. Now, caveat, this is called a C flat technically, but enharmonically, it's the same sound, so it's basically the same thing. For the C7, the guide tones are the E and the B flat. Right? This is the same thing that we see on the G flat 7 chord. Same thing with the enharmonic equivalents. This would actually be called an F flat, but sonically it's the same. And last but certainly not least, we have our F7. And you'll notice that the guide tones for this, A and E flat, are also the guide tones for the B7. Again, change in note name, this is D sharp instead of E flat, but same sound. So if you're playing a rhythm changes, you could certainly play it as 2 measures of D7, followed by 2 measures of G7, followed by 2 measures of C7, followed by 2 measures of F7. Or you could alternate between the chord that's on the page and a tritone sub. So if the page says D7 to G7, I could do D7 for 2 measures, but then do the tritone sub of the G7, which is that D flat 7. Everything just moves down by half step. Next up, I'll go back to the chord on the page, which is C7, also only a half step away from the D flat 7. And the next chord on the page is F7. What's a half step away from C7 and also the tritone sub of F7? B7. So the D7, G7, C7, F7 progression becomes D7, D flat 7, C7, B7. This is one of many applications for tritone subs.